Watercolour is tricky stuff. Sometimes it can seem like it has a mind of its own, but really it just likes to work in certain ways, and it loves it when we follow the rules. Over the course of this series, we're going to be getting to know how the paints work, looking in depth at the ways that we can control them, and helping us to make masterpieces rather than big muddy messes. The first thing to learn in the world of watercolour is the flat wash, how to get a smooth, even covering of pigments. You think this would be easy, right? But actually there's a lot of different things to consider here. Start by grabbing yourself some watercolour paper. The thicker it is the better, so it can soak up the water without buckling. 200 to 300 GSM should be fine. Now, there are a few different types of paper. There's hot press, which has a completely smooth surface, or cold press, which has lots of little bumps to help the pigment stick to it. It's worth playing around with both and seeing which suits your style better. Next up, you want to mix your paint. Watercolour is all about the ratio of paint to water, and for this exercise you want a good mix that's going to let the paint run easily from your brush. Also, make sure you've mixed plenty of paint. If you run out partway through, there is no way you're going to get even coverage. Now, you want to make sure you have your paper at a slight angle. Just stick it to a board and rest it on something. This is going to keep all your paint moving in the same direction and stop it from pulling up on your page and building up colour where you don't want it. So, start at the top and pull all the way across the top of the area, letting the paint run smoothly down the brush. You want to use as big a brush as possible that's still going to allow you the level of control that you need. A good quality brush is going to hold more paint, so it's worth spending a little bit more money on one of them. Now, as you go, you'll notice the paint gathering at the bottom of your brush stroke. This is what's known as the bead. It is your best friend when you are doing this wash. Each time you place your brush down, you want it to be on the bottom of this bead, pulling it down and letting you evenly cover the paper. It's also really important to keep your brush wet. Keep dipping it into your paint and keep that bead nice and juicy. Neither your brush nor the bead should dry before you're ready. And then when you get to the end, give your brush a squeeze or blot it lightly on a towel if you aren't as messy as me, and just tap it onto that bead. Now, when there's less paint on your brush than on the paper, it acts as a kind of vacuum and it's going to suck up that excess paint. I went ahead and gave this a blast with a hairdryer, mostly because it was convenient for filming, but actually it works great at stopping the paint from pooling on the paper. So I'm going to make this an official tip. Just make sure you use the lowest setting, you'll see why in a bit. And there we have it, the formula for the perfect flat wash. It takes some practice and working out, but you have all the knowledge you need to do it. Now, there are plenty of things you'll be tempted to do during this wash that you have to train yourself to avoid, so let's look at the most common mistakes that we make. Firstly, using a brush that's too small. This means that you can't get that big sweeping motion and you're going to be placing your paint in little patches, which is just asking for trouble. Also, by letting your brushes get close to running out of paint, you're varying the amount of pigment in each section. This is a big no-no. Now, because I didn't work all the way across and then down the page, in a minute you'll see I have an edge that's dried, and when I try and go near or over it, the pigment is going to build up, like in a glazing, and it's going to make it even more uneven. It's at this point that we're likely to start panicking and chucking paint all over it and trying to rework the whole surface, but it's just not going to work. Also, you want to avoid mixing more paint partway through. You'll end up with a different ratio of paint to water and you'll get unwanted blooming and backwashing. There's also one other factor that I wanted to mention, and that's some paints just create texture themselves. These are called granulating, and you should be able to find out which of yours do this with a quick search online. With these, the paint particles separate and clump together, and you'll be doomed from the start if you want a nice smooth wash. They are, however, great for creating texture in other areas, so just make a note of which ones do this and bear it in mind when you're planning which colours you're going to use. So how does this all apply to the real world? It's not often you're just going to paint a convenient rectangle. Well, here, with my crudely drawn cactus, you just use the exact same techniques. Start at the top and work your way down, and when the wash splits, just keep an eye on each of the separate beads and make sure neither of them dries. Pay particular attention to your edges here, because once they're dry, they are done. If that all looks a little bit fiddly for your liking, you can also try masking fluid. This comes in pots or pens or tubes, but basically you just lay it over the area you want to stay white, wait for it to dry, and then paint right over the top. Do bear in mind that sometimes the edges of the fluid can affect your wash, so you've got to experiment a bit with this, but you'll get there in the end. That's pretty much it for today. Thanks for joining me. I hope this has cleared up any questions you might have had, and I'll see you next time for Watercolor Basics Part 2. Bye!